Lebanese lawmakers pick a new prime minister, hoping to end a political deadlock in the country. But Hassan Diab will struggle to form a government after failing to secure the backing of the main Sunni bloc in parliament. 3 people killed and thousands arrested in India as mass demonstrations continue against a new citizenship law. This in defiance of a protest ban. And no Christmas breakthrough in France as a nationwide strike over pension reforms continues into its 3rd week. The union's calling another big protest in the new year following talks with the government. Welcome to the France 24 newsroom in Paris. I'm Alexander Orcott. A new Prime Minister has been named by Lebanon's President Michel Aoun. Hassan Diab won support from 69 lawmakers in the 128-member parliament, including the parliamentary bloc of the Shiite Hezbollah and Amal movements. Crucially, however, he failed to secure the backing of the major Sunni leaders in a country where the sectarian-based system dictates that the premier must come from the Sunni community. Maria Sofos has more details.
A little-known university professor and former education minister, Hassan Diab is now set to become Lebanon's new prime minister after being nominated by the country's Shia Muslim factions and President Michel Aoun's Maronite Christian movement. Together, these groups hold a majority of seats in the Lebanese parliament. Diab did not, however, receive the support of the country's influential Sunni blocs or their Christian allies, something that could make it difficult for him to form a government and secure support from the West. He vowed on Thursday to choose his cabinet without delay and tackle Lebanon's current instability.
Our efforts should be focused on preventing collapse, restoring confidence and protecting national unity through strengthening ties between all Lebanese people.
In Beirut on Thursday night, protesters took to the streets to denounce Diab's nomination.
We are here today because we are not satisfied with the newly chosen prime minister. He was imposed without our consent and without the consent of most people in Lebanon.
We refuse this nominee and all of the nominees that were put forward because they don't represent the protest movement and don't support our demands.
Diab emerged as a candidate after outgoing Prime Minister Saad Hariri withdrew from the running on Wednesday. His Sunni-led faction Future Movement did not nominate anyone and said that it would not participate in the next government. Hariri resigned in October in the wake of Lebanon's ongoing mass protests, which were sparked by public anger over corruption and economic mismanagement. Demonstrators are calling for the new government to be made up of neutral technocrats rather than figures from Lebanon's political establishment.
3 people have been killed during protests in India, 2 of them when police opened fire on hundreds of people demonstrating against a controversial new citizenship law, bringing the death toll to 8 from more than a week of unrest. The law allows only non-Muslims from 3 Muslim-majority countries to apply for Indian citizenship.
Most of the people and students all across the India are against this bill. This bill is radically against the constitution itself because it actually divides the India on the basis of religion.
This country is of those who believe in the idea of unity in diversity. So this particular bill has sidelined the ethos of our constitution and the country for which very much we have fought for a long time from the Britishers.
Okay. So there is a lot of anger among the people throughout the country, and there are a lot of protests throughout the country.
The authorities have called a curfew in the city of Mangalore, where the 2 men were killed. Meanwhile, in several parts of the country, the authorities have shut down internet services and text messaging to tens of millions of people. For more details, we earlier spoke to Ramitjit Singh Chima from the digital rights group Access Now.
Many people gravely concerned not just about the citizenship law, but about the way police responded to protesters, the clear allegations of police brutality and how they treated students in actions in Delhi as well as Aligarh in northern India and elsewhere. And people have strong views that actions are violating the constitution, that they're violating Indian values about democracy. And that's something that the government must acknowledge and engage with, because the point in India is that we exist in a rule of law society governed by a constitution that protects our democracy and individual fundamental rights. You have to respect that, including our vision of a secular democratic republic.
China's President Xi Jinping has said he will not allow foreign interference in Macau and Hong Kong affairs as he presides over a lavish ceremony in Macau. This as the former Portuguese territory celebrates 20 years since its handover to Chinese rule. Well, President Xi has praised the gambling capital's patriotism and loyalty, which comes in stark contrast with Hong Kong, which has seen months of anti-government unrest. Now to Russia, where an unidentified gunman opened fire outside the Moscow headquarters of the nation's top security agency on Thursday. The FSB said the assailant killed one officer and wounded 5 others before he was neutralized. Valerie de Kemp has the latest.
Some thought it was a sound of fireworks before realizing that they had to run for cover. A shooting broke out in central Moscow at around 6:45 p.m. local time after an attacker opened fire outside the headquarters of Russia's FSB security agency. According to local media reports, several people were killed and many others have been wounded. The police, meanwhile, has confirmed that the assailant, who acted alone, has been neutralized. The FSB said the shooting occurred at a building behind its headquarters on Lubyanka Square, adding that the attacker did not enter their offices. The area has been cordoned off as heavily armed police officers were seen circling the security perimeter. Meanwhile, witnesses have described scenes of confusion.
Of course, people were scared because first they were running, then special forces armed with rifles ran in the opposite direction. There was a shootout and then several explosions. We didn't know exactly what was happening.
We just heard loud gunshots. They told us to go to the back of the cafe and then into the building. Then we couldn't see or hear anything.
Local authorities are now working to verify the identity of the shooter. His motive remains unknown. At about the same time when the shooting happened, Vladimir Putin was making a speech at a Kremlin concert for FSB and other Russian security personnel. The incident comes on the eve of the Day of Security Service in Russia, which is celebrated on the 20th of December.
Now, here in France, nationwide transport strikes over pension reforms are now in their 3rd week, and following negotiations with the government, the unions have called for another big protest on January the 9th. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, put a positive spin on those negotiations, saying advances have been made.
I want, first of all, to salute the spirit of responsibility and the respect with which we conducted our meeting today and yesterday with our social partners. We've all made an effort to make sure that we had a good discussion. We expressed clearly our ideas, our worries, and our priorities. We listened. We didn't agree on everything, it's true, but we're still going to talk in order to find a compromise.
Well, the government has managed to convince one smaller union to agree to a so-called Christmas truce just over the holidays, but the others plan to continue through. The hardline CGT union in particular has pledged there will be no let-up until the government backs down. But so far, Emmanuel Macron is also showing no signs of blinking. Julia Kim has the story.
On strike at France's largest shipyard in Saint-Nazaire. For the 15th day in a row, members of the hard-left CGT union are calling those still on the job to join their ranks.
I agree with them. We should defend our pensions, but stopping people from working is not the right solution.
Protesters have also targeted France's second-largest fuel refinery in Donge, run by petrol giant Total, a strategic choice.
The strikers have decided to have their way, which is to stop fueling boats, pipelines, trains and trucks, and stop petrol deliveries for 72 hours.
Railroad workers are teaming up with civil servants outside this tax office in Tarbes. They're walking off the job together to fight for a common cause.
We're all affected by this reform because it jeopardizes all sectors, whether public or private. That's why we're taking action together.
From high schools to local councils, protesters continue to put pressure on the government. In Nantes, the CGT are camped outside the train station. They vowed to keep striking through Christmas.
When you're on strike, you don't take a break. We'll see what happens for the holidays, but giving up is out of the question. On the contrary, we have to keep going.
Until the government caves into their demands, these strikers say they're not going anywhere.
Greek police have used tear gas to hold back hundreds of migrants protesting against their detention and living conditions on the island of Samos. A police official said there were also brief clashes near the facility, which has room for up to 650 people, but operates at well over 10 times that capacity. Greece again became the main entry into Europe for migrants and refugees this year, with more than 55,000 arrivals by sea and over 14,000 via land border with Turkey, according to the UN Refugee Agency. A full day after Donald Trump became just the third US president in history to be impeached, a bitter disagreement continues over how the Senate trial will be held. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has already said there is no chance of a conviction, and he will use the Republicans' majority to push through a trial without witnesses. Meanwhile, the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is keeping the ball in the Democrats' court for now, refusing to hand off the impeachment to the Senate. Well, we earlier asked David Smith, the Guardian's Washington correspondent, what kind of toll this is taking politically on Donald Trump.
No great surprise that this has spilled over into today, where you've heard Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell taking pot shots at each other over the upcoming Senate trial, which again I think will merely continue what some journalists here have described as a cold civil war. I think it is fair to say that Democrats' hopes have been dashed in terms of when this impeachment process began. There was that view that perhaps day after day of televised public hearings might shift public opinion significantly, might weaken Trump's hold on his base, and that would then translate through to the politicians, and perhaps the Senate would be in a position to convict him. However, the opposite has happened, and the extremes do seem to have hardened. And yes, there are some polls that suggest perhaps impeachment might even help Trump in the 2020 election, because as we saw last night in a split-screen moment, at the very moment he was being impeached, Trump was holding a campaign rally with some real die-hard supporters in Michigan, and really trying to weaponize impeachment to his own political advantage, using it to say, look, the liberal elite, the establishment are out to get me. They're out to deprive you of your voice. And I think we'll hear a lot more of that going forward to the presidential election.
Ongoing bushfires in Australia have claimed the lives of 2 firefighters in the Sydney area, taking the total death toll to 8 so far. The country has been fighting wildfires across much of its east coast for weeks now. More than 700 homes have been destroyed and nearly 1.2 million hectares of bushland burnt. Shirley Sitbon has the latest.
100 fires are raging across New South Wales, and authorities fear the worst is yet to come. The fire department doesn't even have enough men or trucks to contain the flames.
We've got just on 2,000 personnel on these fires at the moment, and we've got another 500 people that will be elevated onto standby today, forming up 25 different strike teams, which will be pre-positioned and located into some of the most at-risk areas, given the enormity of some of these fire complexes.
That's why the state has declared its second state of emergency in 2 months. It allows firefighters to shut roads and force evacuations.
The biggest concern for us over the next few days is the unpredictability. When you've got those turbulent wind conditions, embers and spot fires can occur very unpredictably.
This is one of the worst fires, the mega blaze surrounding Sydney. It has covered the city with smoke. Air pollution has never been worse, with health professionals concerned by its consequences. Hospitals have already alerted over a surge in cases of respiratory problems. As conditions are set to worsen, authorities urge people to remain indoors.
Stay tuned to France 24.